Hello, my name's Amy Wright, and I'm with Grace and Allie, and we are Team GA, and we were focusing on the Colorado Front Range. The purpose of what we were doing is we were reviewing the current performance of Colorado Front Range to identify and describe two potential sales profitability related problems or opportunities, as well as their root causes. Our goal is to present a recommended solution as well as recommended actions to improve the performance. We will also build a dashboard to monitor the KPIs that will show the effectiveness of the recommended solution. Our data used in the report covers the year 2005 to 2011. We gathered it from the accounting software used at each store to gain information about such as store data, sales data, cost data, as well as specific details about each category of products. This data is reliable as it is obtained directly from the accounting software used in each store. The tools used to assist us in this report included the Power BI desktop application, notably pie charts and bar graphs. These were chosen because they are able to show percentages of a whole as well as compare two categorical variables, respectively. A few of the key metrics used in this report include gross margin percentages and sums, return percentages, and gross costs for the Colorado Front Range region. We were able to narrow these down to specifically our assigned region as compared to the worldwide data, and even further narrow data into individual stores. These metrics were useful because they allowed us to condense information to a format that was relevant. So a quick regional overview is there are 11 stores across the state of Colorado, and this region of stores is ranked number 3 overall in terms of gross margin, as seen in the graph below, with 229 million. And we occupy a large percentage of Contanzo's total gross margin at 6.68%. As this is such a large percentage of the company's total gross margin, it's important for us to understand where our profits are coming from and what we can do to improve them.
Sweet. Okay, so for issue overview, so the two issues that we have discovered are low margins and overall sales for toys and games, and high return rates for music, movies, and audiobooks. The pie chart below to the right shows, or to the left, sorry, shows the gross margin by product category, and the bar chart on the bottom right shows the percent of total returns by cell phones, which were the least returned, and music, movies, and audiobooks, which were the most returned. Currently, these are problems for Contoso. Is that how you say it? Contoso, right? But if resolved, these can turn into great opportunities for profit. And then this brings me to my next slide, which is the analysis for these two issues. So for the first one, the gross sales for toys and games are only 1.06 million, whereas the other categories are as high as 100 million. Additionally, toys and games are only generating 0.27% of our total gross margins compared to other categories such as home appliances, which are generating almost 30% of our gross margin. For root cause, one potential root cause for low gross margins and sales for the toys and games category could be that not that many kids or young adults live in the Colorado Front Range region or shop at any of the Contoso-owned stores there. Their target market seems to be consumers of computers and home appliances more, which indicates an older, more mature demographic. As seen in the figure in the bottom left, while games and toys have a similar individual gross margin to other categories, they make up a very insignificant percentage of our overall sales revenue. It may be more worthwhile to stop selling games and toys so that maybe more attention can be put on our more profitable categories. Now for the second issue, music, movies, and audiobooks are being returned at a much higher rate than the other product categories. Their average return rate is close to 1%, whereas the phones have a lower return rate of around 0.4%. One of the potential root causes for high return rates in music, movies, and audiobooks could be attributed to consumers returning these items after consumption, as they may no longer have a need for them anymore. And then the chart below to the right shows a comparison of the stores with the 3 highest overall return rates and the stores with the 3 lowest overall return rates. The Contoso Greenlay #1 store has a rate of 0.96% returned merchandise, while the Contoso, tough word, Lafayette store has a rate of only 0.78% returned merchandise. And then as for the next slide is the conclusion that we came to. So after analyzing data from the Colorado Range-Front region, we identified 2 issues. The games and toys category has the lowest contribution to gross sales, suggesting potential improvement through its removal, while music, movies, and audiobooks exhibit the highest return rates, indicating a need for stricter return policies to mitigate returns after use. And then the next slide, we have our recommended solutions. So for actions, a recommended action to take to solve the problem of low overall sales for games and toys would be to remove the categories altogether from the Colorado Front Range. To solve the problem of high return rates on music, movies, and audiobooks would be to implement stricter return policies. For impacts, by removing the games and toys category, that will allow the Colorado Front Range region to focus more on products and categories that bring in the most profit. And then for number 2, by implementing stricter return policies for music, movies, and audiobooks, we can lessen the amount that's returned. Lastly, for outcomes, one outcome of removing the games and toys category will be the money saved on not having to produce and sell them in this region. Another outcome would be increased shelf space for other more profitable products to occupy. Number 2, and then, the last outcome of implementing stricter return policies for music, movies, and audiobooks would be to increase profits for this category, music, movies, and audiobooks. And that's it.
All right, so now I'm just going to kind of walk us through our dashboard that we made. So the first page is focused a lot more on our return percentages. So in that top left bar graph, we've seen a lot of these earlier, but it shows the difference between the return rates of cell phones versus the music, movies, and audiobooks categories. You can kind of see the big difference there. And then in the bottom left, we just have the percent of total merchandise returned by store. And this one just shows the top 3 and bottom 3. So that kind of gives us an idea of we want to get down to the benchmark that some of the stores with the lower return rates are getting to. And then in the top right, we have just our overall return percent ratio. And that's just across all stores in the region, which is about 0.88% right now. And below that, we also just have, this is basically just goes along with that top left bar graph. It's showing you the exact percentages. You can see that most of the music, movies, and audiobook categories are getting returned above 1% of the time. The second page of our dashboard is more about our gross margins and sales. So we saw that pie graph in the top left earlier. You can see that home appliances and computers are just such a bigger chunk of our gross margin. So we'd really like to focus on those. In the top right, we have our gross cost, sales, and margins by product categories. So that kind of breaks it down, showing, again, how the gross margin ratios are the same, but we're just not making as much money. And then finally, on the bottom, we just have our gross sales by store and category for all of it across the board. It just helps lay it out a little bit easier. All right, and finally, we're going to get to our proposed new KPIs. So the first one we want to implement is going to be called reasons for return. And we want to reduce return rates by finding out the reasons that people are returning their purchases. So to compare this, we would use the previous rate of return, and the increment is going to be the percent of total return rate. We calculate this by dividing the number of returns by total items purchased and separate those into categories. And so we aren't able to use this KPI right now because we don't actually have the reasons for return. So if we started collecting that, we could kind of get a better idea of why people are returning things so often. The second KPI is kind of similar, but it's more about the return rates for music, audiobooks, and movies. And we're trying to find out why this category specifically has such a high return rate. So again, we're going to compare that to previous return rates for this category and kind of go by a percent of return rate. And we just divide the number of these returns by the total number of items in this category and compare that to the previous rate again. The new data we'd want for this is actually the time period between the purchase and the return. So we could tell if someone had an audiobook for a week, they probably already listened to it. And so returning it at that point, maybe we need to implement something stricter so that people can't do that. So overall, that was our presentation, and hopefully these are some great new ideas we can use to help gain our profits in the future. Thank you.